Hi, I'm Dr. Knight, your superintendent, and today we're going to have a little bit of a lesson about the wildland-urban interface. That's a big, long word, so we like to call it a WUI, a W-U-I. I bet everybody can say WUI, but the wildland-urban interface has to do with the beautiful areas that come through Oak Park that are wild, that come through the areas where we all live and go to school. And so we're going to learn a little bit more about the plants that live here and the creeks that run through the community, and it's not going to take that long. And then there's going to be an activity for you to go and visit maybe one of these areas, like one of the creek areas, the trails that go through them, and see how much you can find along the way. So let's get started. Let's look here. I'm going to try to turn this camera around, and then we're going to have a look at the creek that we're going to be following on this short walk. Okay, so this is one of the creeks. So this is Medea Creek, and this is what we call a second order creek or stream in the area. That means that it's fed by at least two first order streams that build into it. So if you look at a map of Oak Park, you can kind of see that you've got a big creek that runs through most of it, yet it splits. So one part goes up by the middle school, and another part goes on the other side through the duck pond. So those are called first order streams, and they flow into this one, which is a second order stream. And that's a good way of understanding a little bit more about what we call the riparian areas of the California area. Riparian is a long kind of a word, and it really only means something to do with a river or watershed or water area. So, and you can probably see as we walk along here today that this area is impacted by the water that's around it. In other words, there's different kinds of trees and plants that live in and around the water and those that don't. So we're gonna have a look at some of these as we go through here right now. So here's one of the first things that I'm noticing, which is a big California sycamore tree. In fact, there's a bunch of them up here. And these were not planted, they arrived here on their own. And these are native to California. That means they live all around in California. And they live in other places in the area as well. But they're big California sycamore trees. They're really beautiful. They are fully adapted living here in California. They do like living next to streams and creeks because they do like some water. So if you're walking around in the hills, you may not see one. But if you're walking around where there's a water source, you're very likely to see one. Another tree I see nearby here is an oak tree. And one of the things you're going to see is that there's a couple of different kinds of oak trees around in Oak Park. So this is one that we call the valley oak. And you can see the leaves that it has. They're different than one of the other oaks around here, which is the live oak, which we're going to see in a second. But the valley oak are these big giant ones that you see. I'm pointing up to it right now. They are really, really beautiful. They're very old. Some of them are 400 or 500 years old. And one of the ways you can tell it's a valley oak is that it loses its leaves in the winter. In fact, this tree is starting to do that right now because it's November. Let's look at another kind of oak tree that's over here. So this kind of an oak tree is what we call a live oak. And this tree is called a live oak because it doesn't lose its leaves in the winter. It keeps them green all year long. And as you can tell, if I can move a little bit closer here, you can see that they have a different kind of a leaf than the valley oak does. So if you haven't learned anything else so far today, you can learn to tell the difference between a live oak like this one and a valley oak like that one. Now there are big live oaks, but they're not as big as the valley oaks. In fact, here's a big live oak over here. And you can see it over there. So they do like living together. What's interesting is that they don't live together all over California. So what you see is we have a lot of valley oaks north of here and a lot of live oaks south of here. And in Oak Park and Ventura County, parts of LA County, we have both of them living together. So they do seem to get along nicely with each other. So some of the things you might notice here, we're walking along this stream bed, and there's a variety of different plants that are here. And you might think, well, how did these get here, and do they belong here or do they not belong here? So in just looking at this, you might think to yourself, which ones of these plants look like they might belong here, and which ones do you think don't? And we have some words that we use to describe these. So we call some plants native plants, which means that they're kind of supposed to be here. They live in the area by nature without anybody's putting them here. And then we have plants that are called non-native. That means that somebody put them here. And then we have plants that are called invasive. An invasive plant is a non-native plant that lives in an area and is doing damage to the ecosystem. So let's look at a non-native invasive plant right here, these palm trees. So they're sort of in between. They're native to California, these fan palms. They live around Palm Springs and stuff, but they're not supposed to be living here in Oak Park. So what happened is that people planted them in the area and their seeds get loose and carried around. And then they decide to take up residence on their own. And because these palms are living here, they're going to eventually grow into very big palm trees, that could be 100 feet tall. And in that process, they're going to suck a lot of water out of the creek. And then that's going to take water away from native plants that are right behind it. So like these are willows, for example, red willows, and these are native to the area, and they're supposed to be here. So so are some of these other grasses that are in here. Some of these are rushes. This is like different types that are living inside here that are supposed to be here, and they live here near the creek because it's wet. What you're noticing as we walk through, and what you already know, is that California is a really dry place. I don't know whether you've been counting it or not, but it hasn't really rained in almost 9 months. This is the middle of November, and hold on, there's a helicopter coming by. But anyway, it's the middle of November, early November, and it hasn't really rained since April. And so what kind of plants can live without any kind of rain for 9 months? So the only kind of plants that can really do that are what we call Mediterranean plants that live in a climate like ours, where it doesn't rain very often for 8 or 9 months of the year.